If he's already with someone else, why does he keep texting you at 2 a.m.? Why does he say he feels something but never makes a move? Why are you constantly left wondering, is it me, or am I just his emotional escape? Welcome to the raw, unfiltered truth about love triangles, the kind no one wants to talk about, but so many women are silently stuck in. You're not crazy for wanting clarity. You're not desperate, and you're definitely not alone. There's a reason you feel connected to him, even though he's tied to someone else. It's not just chemistry, it's a psychological pattern. And until you understand it, you'll keep getting pulled into situationships where you're always the almost, the maybe, the one who waits. But here's the secret. He didn't choose her because she's better. He didn't not choose you because you're lacking. He's operating on emotional autopilot, bound by comfort, routine, fear, or guilt. And if you don't know how to shift the dynamic, you'll keep orbiting his life instead of owning your place in it. In this video, we're going to cut through the confusion and show you exactly how to take back your emotional power, shift how he sees you without begging or chasing, and become the woman he can't unseen, even if he's still with someone else right now. Because love isn't about waiting in the shadows, it's about knowing your worth and letting it speak louder than your silence. Let's begin. If you're watching this right now, chances are you've asked yourself one haunting question. Why hasn't he chosen me? You show up, you're patient, you're emotionally available, you're even understanding when he tells you he's confused or not ready. And still, he doesn't choose you. Not fully, not publicly, not in a way that matches what you feel inside. Here's the truth that most people won't say out loud. It's not always about you. Sometimes it's about the version of himself that he's not ready to face yet. When a man is emotionally unavailable or stuck in a situation with someone else, whether it's a long-term partner, an ex, or even just the comfort of routine, he clings to what feels familiar. Even if he's mentally checked out, emotionally disconnected, or longing for something deeper, familiarity often wins over fulfillment. But there's another layer. Often, men don't choose the woman who feels best for them. They choose the one who fits where they currently are in life. If he's operating from fear, guilt, or obligation, he may stay where he feels safe. That means even if you offer something deeper, more aligned, more real, he might not have the emotional maturity to choose it yet. Now here's the part that really stings. You might be the fantasy he escapes to, but not the reality he believes he deserves. That's not because you're too much. It's because some part of him is still trapped in self-doubt, inertia, past wounds. And when a man hasn't done the work to truly know himself, he can't fully see you. He sees your beauty, your loyalty, your energy, but he also feels the weight of what choosing you would mean. Choosing you means growth. It means change. It means letting go of his emotional crutches. And that's terrifying for someone who hasn't outgrown his current comfort zone yet. This is the part where most women start questioning themselves. They think, if I was just a little less emotional, maybe he'd stay. Or if I gave him more time, maybe he'd come around. But this kind of thinking keeps you stuck in a loop where you're always trying to be enough for someone who hasn't even figured out what he wants. But hear me now. It's not your job to wait for someone to choose you. It's your job to know that you're already worth choosing. When you internalize that truth, something powerful happens. Your energy shifts. You stop shrinking. You stop waiting. And ironically, that's often when they finally see you clearly. He hasn't chosen you yet, not because you aren't the one, but because he's not yet the man who can meet the version of you that you're becoming. And that's why what you do next matters more than what he does now. Let's talk about something that doesn't get enough attention: emotional blocks in men. These are not always obvious. In fact, they're often hidden behind charm, mixed signals, or even affection. That's why it can be so confusing. He shows up just enough to keep hope alive, but not enough to give you clarity. So what's really going on? Most men are never taught how to safely feel their emotions, let alone process them. Vulnerability, that's something they've been taught to hide, suppress, or turn into sarcasm. Growing up, many boys are rewarded for being strong, stoic, or emotionally detached. So when they grow into men, they often confuse emotional intimacy with danger. That means when they start to feel something real, something raw, they shut down, they ghost, they stall. They say things like, I don't know what I want, or I'm not ready. Even when everything between you feels deep and undeniable. Why? because being truly seen by someone who holds emotional weight feels overwhelming when they've never been safe in their own vulnerability. Here's what that looks like in real time. He pulls away after moments of connection. He gets close, then distant. He gives you mixed energy, not because he's trying to hurt you, but because his system literally doesn't know how to hold closeness without fear kicking in. It's emotional whiplash, but it makes sense once you realize he's protecting himself from the discomfort of truly opening up. And then there's shame. If he's still tied to someone else, maybe an ex, a current partner, or even a toxic cycle, he may feel trapped, guilty, conflicted. But instead of being honest with you, he compartmentalizes. He tries to manage two emotional truths, the comfort of what's known and the temptation of what's real with you. That conflict creates tension in him and confusion in you. But here's the thing. Emotional blocks are not permanent. They're patterns, learned habits, trauma responses. And unless a man is aware of them and committed to healing, they will run his love life like autopilot. He'll keep choosing what's safe, what's easy, what doesn't challenge him to grow. And sadly, that often means rejecting or avoiding the very person who makes him feel most alive. If you've felt like you had to dim your feelings just to be easier to love, or if you've been told you're too much, it's likely you were never too much. He was just emotionally underdeveloped. Understanding this doesn't mean you excuse bad behavior. It doesn't mean you wait for him to fix himself. But it does mean you stop blaming yourself for the emotional walls he hasn't learned how to tear down yet. Because love without emotional availability, that's not love, it's longing. And you deserve more than just being a beautiful idea in someone else's blocked up heart. If you've ever wondered why some women seem to effortlessly attract attention, connection, and commitment, without chasing or forcing anything, it's not luck, and it's definitely not manipulation. What they've tapped into is something ancient, powerful, and deeply magnetic feminine energy. And it's not about how you look. It's not about being submissive, quiet, or passive. True feminine energy is about being in full alignment with your emotional truth, without apology. You don't attract deeply by performing. You attract by embodying, by being so grounded in who you are, and so unapologetically expressive of your joy, your softness, your sensuality, your wisdom, that people can't help but feel you. Not just see you, feel you. This is what draws him in. Not the perfect words, not bending yourself to fit his needs, not over-explaining your worth. Your magnetic power lives in your energy. How you hold space, how you own silence, how you respond instead of react, how you stay open even when you're tempted to close. Feminine energy is about receptivity. It's not passive, it's powerful. It doesn't chase, it invites. It doesn't demand, it attracts. The more you trust your inner knowing, the more you move with intention rather than fear, the more magnetic you become, not just to him, but to life. Now here's where it shifts everything. A woman in her feminine power doesn't compete. She doesn't compare. She doesn't try to convince a man to choose her. She doesn't lower her standards to be chosen, because she knows that being chosen by the wrong energy is a form of self-abandonment. The more you embrace your softness without seeing it as weakness, the more you stop managing his emotions and start nurturing your own, the more the right man, the ready man, feels drawn to your presence. Men crave polarity, but not performative femininity, not fake sweetness, not saying I'm fine when you're not. True polarity comes from authenticity, from emotional depth, from feeling safe within yourself first, so others can feel safe with you. Your feminine energy becomes magnetic when you stop hiding your heart, when you stop over-functioning, when you stop hustling for someone's love, like it's a prize you need to earn. Love is not a transaction. And you're not a resume he needs to review. You're a full breathing experience of warmth, mystery, truth, softness, and depth. That's what makes you unforgettable. And when a man feels that energy, truly feels it, he can't unsee it. He may resist it. He may run from it if he's not ready. But he will remember you, because you reflected something back to him he didn't know he was missing. And that is where your real power lives. Not in trying to be the loudest option, but in becoming the woman whose energy lingers in every quiet space he walks into after you. There's a fine line between being available and being perishable. The moment you start chasing, emotionally, energetically, or physically. You stop being seen as the woman he has to rise to meet. Instead, you become the woman who's always reaching down to try and pull him up. That shift in dynamic is subtle but powerful, because men don't bond through pressure. They bond through perception. And perception is something you can shift without ever needing to chase. Here's the truth. Most women chase without realizing it. It's not just texting first. It's the emotional overinvestment, the waiting by the phone, the constant wondering if you're enough, instead of checking in to see if he's enough for you. That's the energetic chase, and men feel it. So how do you shift his perception without chasing? You stop trying to change his mind, and you start changing your energy. You reclaim your attention. You bring it back to your world, your value, your rhythm. The moment you stop orbiting around him, he notices, because the emotional space you once filled with longing becomes mystery. And men are wired to be drawn to what they can't immediately define or possess. You shift his perception by no longer being the woman who waits for breadcrumbs. You become the woman who chooses herself, and in doing so, you reset the entire dynamic. Suddenly, you're not the one trying to prove your worth. You're the one observing if he can meet your standards, your energy, your pace. And here's where it gets even deeper. When a man feels that you're no longer energetically depending on him for validation, he starts to reevaluate everything. Why isn't she reaching out? Why does she feel more powerful now than when I had her full attention? That curiosity grows. That distance you once feared. It becomes the exact space where his realization begins. You're not playing games. You're removing yourself from a dynamic that drains you and stepping into one that honors you. There's a difference between being emotionally available and being emotionally chasing. One invites connection. The other tries to force it. Let him feel your absence, not as punishment, but as a shift in self-worth. Let him feel your standards, not as an ultimatum, but as a quiet clarity that speaks louder than words. When you stop convincing someone to choose you, you give them the space to either rise to your level or fade away. And either outcome is a win for you. Because the truth is, when you show up in your full magnetic energy and then pull it back with grace when it's not being honored, you become unforgettable. Not because you tried harder, but because you finally stopped trying to be the exception and started becoming the standard. And standards don't chase, they attract. Naturally, powerfully, silently. You can feel it before you see it. When a man starts emotionally detaching from another woman, whether it's a girlfriend, a wife, or someone he's been tied to out of routine, it doesn't always begin with a dramatic breakup. It starts in the subtle shifts, in the pauses, the hesitation, the emotional distance he can't explain, even to himself. One of the first signs is that he becomes restless in the relationship. What once felt comfortable now feels like a cage. He might still go through the motions, showing up, saying the right things, but there's a dullness in his energy. His laughter doesn't reach his eyes. He starts to look through her, instead of at her. He might stop initiating emotional intimacy. Conversations become surface level. He avoids conflict not out of peace, but because he's emotionally checked out. He doesn't have the same need to resolve things, because in his mind he's already drifting. He's not dreaming about a future with her anymore. He's imagining a future away from her. Another clear sign is when he starts opening up more to someone else. He begins to share his thoughts, fears, and emotions with a different woman. You. That's not casual, that's a signal. Because men don't open that door unless something inside them is already disconnecting from where they are. When he starts feeling safer being vulnerable with you than with the woman he's committed to, emotional detachment is already underway. Watch how he talks about her. Does he stop defending her? Does he speak with indifference? Not anger. Indifference is the real red flag of emotional detachment. It means he no longer feels emotionally invested in trying to fix things. He might say, "It's just complicated," or "We've been off for a while," as if he's preparing you and himself for a shift that hasn't happened yet on the outside but has already begun inside him. He might start pulling away from shared routines with her, staying out longer, avoiding quality time, skipping traditions. Emotional detachment rarely begins with a breakup. It begins with a quiet withdrawal of energy, attention, and presence. And when that emotional current starts flowing in your direction instead, it creates a dynamic you can feel before he even acknowledges it. But here's where it gets real. Detachment from her doesn't guarantee attachment to you. A man can emotionally check out of one relationship and still not be ready for another, especially if he hasn't done the work to process, heal, and truly end that chapter. Don't confuse his drift from her as full readiness for you. Still, when you see these signs, when you feel the shift, it means something is moving. He may not be able to name it yet, but his heart is looking for resonance, for alignment, for truth. And when his soul feels emotionally unfulfilled, it will start reaching toward what feels real, even before his mind has caught up. Pay attention, not just to what he says, but to where his energy is starting to live. There's a difference between being liked, being wanted, and being chosen. If you want to position yourself as the one, you don't do it by begging for his attention, overgiving, or trying to outperform the woman he's with. You do it by becoming the woman who stands so fully in her worth that she shifts the entire frequency of the room just by being in it. Men don't fall in love with perfection. They fall in love with presence, with how they feel when they're around you. So ask yourself, are you trying to prove your value, or are you allowing your value to be felt? Being the one is not about strategy. It's about alignment. It's not about outshining someone else. It's about being so rooted in who you are that you disqualify anything that doesn't meet your energy. When a man senses that you don't need him to validate you, but that you're open to receiving love in a real, grounded way, his perception of you changes. You stop being a possibility. You become a priority. You position yourself as the one by creating emotional safety, not through performance, but through consistency, through emotional self-respect, through knowing what you will and won't entertain. Because the truth is, when you truly value yourself, you will never beg to be chosen. You'll let someone else miss out before you shrink into a version of yourself that fits their indecision. A woman who is the one in a man's life is the one who doesn't flinch when things get unclear. She leans into her truth. She doesn't chase clarity from him. She creates clarity within herself. That energy, it's unforgettable. It tells him, I'm not here to fill your emotional gaps. I'm here to walk beside someone who's ready. She also doesn't compete. Not with his current partner, not with his past, not with his confusion. She doesn't have to. Her energy speaks before she does. She holds space, but she doesn't wait around. She's open, but not available to emotional crumbs. And here's what happens next. The moment he feels you're not emotionally dependent on his choice, but you are deeply connected to your own self-worth, something shifts. You become the woman he can't replace, not because you pushed, not because you played a part, but because you stood in a version of self-love that most people don't even recognize until it's gone. To be the one is to live in integrity with your standards, your softness, your power, and your peace. It's not about being chosen. It's about showing up as someone who would choose herself first. And that's what makes the right man want to rise, not just to meet you, but to keep you. You don't become the one by chasing love. You become the one by becoming the woman whose love knows its worth. Emotional availability. It sounds simple, but it's one of the most powerful and rare energies you can embody. Most people aren't truly available, even when they're in relationships. They're physically present, but emotionally guarded. They say the right things, but their heart isn't open. They love halfway, carefully, from a distance, and that kind of love always leaves you starving. When you're emotionally available, you're not afraid to be seen. You don't hide behind sarcasm, detachment, or control. You allow yourself to feel, and you allow others to feel you. That's magnetic. Because emotional availability isn't weakness, it's confidence. It says, I trust myself enough to stay open, even if there's risk involved. Men crave this, even if they don't consciously know it. When a woman shows up in emotional truth, softness, and self-awareness, it cuts through the noise. It creates intimacy, depth, resonance. It makes him feel something real. And that feeling stays with him long after you've left the room. But here's the paradox. Emotional availability only becomes powerful when it's paired with discernment. You're not available to just anyone. You're not emotionally wide open to prove you're lovable. You're open because that's who you are. but you're selective about who gets access to that space. Most women lose their power when they confuse availability with overgiving. They pour out love hoping to receive love back. But true emotional availability isn't about chasing. It's about being, it's about knowing what you feel, expressing it with clarity, and staying grounded whether or not someone gives you the response you hoped for. This is where your presence becomes unforgettable. Because when a man experiences a woman who's emotionally available, not to manipulate, not to seek validation, but just as a reflection of her wholeness, it creates contrast. Especially if he's used to emotional shutdown games or conditional affection. You don't have to be loud to be felt. You just have to be real. You just have to mean what you say. You just have to hold your emotional truth without over-explaining it. And when he realizes you're capable of emotional depth without becoming emotionally dependent, it sparks something inside him. A hunger he didn't know he had. A sense of safety he didn't know he needed. You're not just another connection. You become the mirror that shows him what real emotional presence looks like. That's when walls start to come down. That's when resistance softens. That's when he stops comparing, calculating, or compartmentalizing, and starts feeling. So if you want to stand out, if you want to draw someone in on a soul level, don't harden yourself to protect your heart. Strength is not in your armor, it's in your openness, your tenderness, your emotional availability held with wisdom, and protected by boundaries, is not only your superpower, it's the exact energy that turns a maybe into a yes. If you've made it this far, I want you to take a deep breath. Because this journey we just walked together wasn't just about him, it was about you. Your energy, your awareness, your truth. Everything we talked about. How to make him choose you. How to shift his perception. How to embody emotional availability. Isn't about playing a role to win someone over. It's about becoming so grounded in your self-worth that love starts to align around you. Now here's what most women get wrong. After learning all this, they rush into action. They start texting, testing, shifting their tone, trying to use what they've learned. But this isn't a tactic, it's a transformation. And it starts with how you show up in your life, not just how you show up in front of him. If he's still tied to someone else, emotionally or physically, your job is not to compete. It's to become so deeply in tune with your standards, your value, and your feminine power, that the wrong connections naturally fall away. You stop forcing, you start attracting, you stop fixing, you start embodying. Ask yourself, am I waiting to be chosen? Or have I already chosen myself? Because once you make that internal shift, once you stop auditioning for a man's love, and start aligning with love itself, you'll notice everything changes. Your energy becomes magnetic. Your boundaries become natural. You no longer chase or settle for confusion. You become the woman who invites clarity, who requires it. If he's meant for you, he will rise. He will feel the difference. And if he doesn't, that's not your rejection. That's your redirection. That's life clearing space for someone who sees you without needing to lose something else first. So what do you do next? You slow down. You return to yourself. You stop responding out of fear or scarcity and start responding from wholeness. You take your power back from his indecision and invest it into your own growth. You stop watching for signs and start becoming the sign. This isn't about proving you're the one to him. It's about recognizing you already are. Whether he sees it or not, let him feel your absence. If he's not ready for your presence, let silence speak where begging used to live. Let your energy lead. And most importantly, remind yourself every single day, you do not have to chase what is aligned. When you're deeply connected to your emotional truth, you won't just attract love, you'll inspire it. You'll call it forward, not from a place of desperation, but from a place of deep magnetic, unshakable certainty. Now's the time to walk in that energy. Let him choose you, but only after you've fully chosen yourself.